Hi, I'm Adrianne. Nice to meet you all. I have a couple of things that I usually start with. One of them is not a land acknowledgement. There's a lot of reasons why that might or might not be. How many of you have actually thought about why and how the land acknowledgement works first? Okay. What's the thing about it that seems impactful? Yeah?
Promoting understanding of the land that you're on, because a lot of people don't know as they're traveling where they are. Mm-hmm. So locating yourself and also promoting respect.
What is the thing that it doesn't have? I mean, respect is wonderful. Recognition is important. Is there anything that goes with it? Like, I am currently lost as pants. I know-ish where I am. GPS barely helped me to arrive here. But I very personally know the land that I live on. And I think there's a real piece of how we're going to start, and I don't know what was expected of me, but this is the show that you're going to get. One of the things about recognizing and acknowledging the land, I'm always grateful when it happens and I hear it and it wasn't asked for, but I also want people to understand that I always also want a little bit more. Not from you, like I'm not asking, I would like things. Don't get me wrong, I love gifts, that's great. But what I'm asking for is things like recognition of. You are talking about a relationship to the land that you're on. Now, if you are a literal brand new newcomer, absolutely have no idea of the land that you're on, then I really want you to start with that respect and recognition and understanding of where you are now and historically. But I also want to know that you recognize my relationship to this land, that it started way before we kept books of it, far before the history of this place, which is quite cool, I have to say. I was just looking at the floor out there. I'm looking at this wall. The history of what we have been capable of from the beginning of time is amazing. But I also want you to recognize, and I hope for understanding of your own relationship also, and what you can do with that. Because one of the words that was in my lovely bio, which I'm always a little bit hesitant about because I want it to be enough that you get a sense of who I am without having to say Indigenous like 88 times. I focus on Indigenous food security and Indigenous food sovereignty and Indigenous agriculture. No, I don't, actually. I just focus on food sovereignty and food security and agriculture and people and humans, and everybody eats. And we all had different systems of knowledge at one time. And now we have a multitude of them, but we classify them. Well, this is settler technology and this is Indigenous knowledge. And those two things don't really go together. And that's Western science. It's hard science. And that's hunters and gatherers who happen to grow millions of bushels of corn. I don't know if any of you have ever grown corn. I've never seen it magically just grow where someone could go and gather it. If that happens in your yard, I'm moving in, first of all. That's the thing I actually want from the land agreement. I'm like, you know what? Slide over. I hope your couch is comfy. You're going to sleep there. What's your room look like? Because it's mine now. Where's this corn? Where did it come from? Right? Like, I think part of the thing that when we think of, and the title of the series is about seeds, right? We're talking about planting, not planting, but growing also. I live for every growing, agriculture, pun, wordplay. I can't help myself. I can't. See, the hard part is I started out planning for this evening, and I have a lovely discussion that I could give to you. I really do. I want to tell you about the work that I do, though. I want to tell you about the things that are intriguing that we have been able to find out. But I also want to tell you stories. I want people to understand that there are stories of food, there are stories of growing that really aren't mythically Indigenous knowledge. They're like, how many of you have heard of companion planting? How many of you know that sometimes plants grow better together? Right? That's just a thing. If you're in my class, and I teach a class called Dish with One Spoon, Diet, Health, and Traditional Botany. It sounds fancy, right?
It's awesome.
Even I was like, this is cool. Could I take this class? Oh, wait, it's mine. I have to teach it. I'll prepare you as well. And fortunately for the camera and for you guys, the current swearer in my house, because my niece is special needs and she's a teenager, her current swear is biscuits. So occasionally you'll find out I will swear. I might swear a lot, and biscuits is what's going to be the thing. Which is great, because the one before biscuits was not okay for recordings. At all. But one of the things that happened is I'm teaching this class, and I'm actually teaching that class this semester. So we had this huge discussion just yesterday about the Dish with One Spoon. I mean, have any of you ever heard of the Dish with One Spoon? It is a wampum agreement. It's a treaty, some would say. Some would say it's a beaver tail. Tail, for the record, just so we're clear. It's not a story. I mean, it is a story, but it's also, the metaphorical discussion was about this agreement. So one of the parts about understanding the history of a place and a space and the things that we can do in them is understanding all of the factors that play into that. So I'm going to start with a whole bunch of little tiny stories. Normally, here's the other thing. Normally I get paid to talk 3 hours at a time. So I'm going to pull out my phone so that I can be like, oh, I'm sorry, it's now 10 p.m. and I didn't realize that I had kept you all past my bedtime. Because that's what it would be. The really strange part of doing public talks like this is I'm supposed to give you what I want to tell you about the thing that we're here to learn about. And that's not usually how I do stuff. I would actually ask you guys, what did you think you were coming to find out? And that's a genuine question. What did you think we're coming here for? You were just like, nameless thing. Love to support the Brown Homestead, that's it? No. So what brought you here?
Well, it's interesting to see what the Indigenous people, what type of agricultural tools that they worked with back in, 1700s or 1600s? Or
Same ones that they worked with before fellows arrived on a boat.
shovel and an axe.
No. Scapula. Bones. I have horns. We have a bin of them in my shed. My mom still uses them. We do have a shovel, we do have an axe, we do have all of those things. But they were not always necessary either. One of the things that we know is, yes, for example, we'll start with a story because that will help with this understanding and it'll go back to that. So if you think of the story, how many of you know what a mound garden is? Or the Three Sisters? How many of you ever heard that story? There's this lovely story of these three sisters that spend all of their spring and summer out in the field working. And they're lovely. The oldest sister, she's out there, she's tall, she's got this long hair, it's beautiful. Everyone's like, oh, look at her, she's so tall, just beautiful. She's like the perfect older sister, she does all the things. And then she always carries her baby sister around. They're baby sisters. Very small, got a little sweet, adorable little light green frock, but she crawls all over her sister, just always looking, always checking things out. Very, babies do that. And then there's the middle sister who, if you're a middle child, it's the thing. It's a real thing where you're just like, I don't really need you guys. You don't really need me. I'm just going to be over here doing my own thing. I'm going to look around. I'm going to check out what's happening. This is where I'm at. But every day in the field, there's also this little boy who comes around. And the boy that you hear about depends on who's telling you the story. Always. So in my community, it's always some little Mohawk boy because he's nosy and he's always working. That's what he says anyway. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's a Mohawk boy. But if you're from Oneida, then it's a really attractive Oneida boy. And again, so it just depends on who's telling the story. But this is the stories the way that I've told it. This is how I've known it. He comes and he does stuff. He knaps flint. He makes bows. He makes tools. He brings all of his stuff and he sits by the water and he works and he watches those sisters. Part of me thinks that's a little weird. Are they watching each other? Maybe the oldest sister thinks, this little Mohawk boy is pretty good looking. Maybe it's a thing. But he spends all spring and summer doing that. He's always, every single day he comes out, he's watching, but he's doing it and he's over by the water and he's watching them and they're watching him. And the summer comes and it's beautiful and you see everything changes, right? All the leaves come out and my niece, she calls trees in the wintertime sticks. There's no leaves. She's like, look at the sticks. I'm like, those are some great sticks. And then the spring comes and it's like, look at the trees. And they're covered. And she's just excited. Same thing happens. So that's what happens. This boy watches and he watches for all those changes to happen. He watches for the baby to start crawling. She's checking out everything. She's around. She's always doing something. It's very exciting. It starts to get warm out. It's getting pretty hot out. The oldest sister is like, oh, I should have worn a different dress. This is pretty hot. And then one day she wakes up and the baby's gone. And she's like, oh, I had one job. You know, you're babysitting and you're like, oh, why did you run off? I had like, there was nowhere, you didn't need to go anywhere. Everything you could possibly do, all the entertainment, everything we've wanted is right here. But the baby's gone. That boy still, he comes to the river and he sees the oldest sister still looking. And she watches and she watches and she watches and days go by and weeks go by and she watches every day for some evidence of her baby sister. And it starts to actually get like chilly in the evenings and it's starting to get colder. It's late in the year now. It's getting to this time of year. And then one day the middle sister's gone. She's like, okay, I had 2 jobs. Turns out I had 2 jobs. And I've mucked it up badly because now she's sad. Now she's starting to be worried because something has gone wrong. And she had 1 job and that boy, he starts to come less. He's not there as often. He's out doing stuff and she sees him and he's got his pack basket on and he's out doing things, but he doesn't stop. He doesn't sit, he doesn't hang out, he doesn't watch. And she's like, well, who was he watching? What is he doing now? Where are they gone? And she starts to bow her head and she's starting to lean over. She's just so overcome. She's so sad. Till finally one day that boy, he comes and he picks her up whole and he carries her home. He's like, I think I can help you. And he takes her home to the longhouse and he lays her on a rack, on a mat, only to discover that her sisters are there, laying with her. They're like, we've been busy helping the people. We've been helping them. That boy, he brought us here. And it turns out, the baby sister's like, we have put beans into the soup pot. We have started to put squash into the soup pot. And in the winter, when the time is right, you too will go into there. We will put corn into there. And she's so overcome at being reunited with her sisters that she promises the Haudenosaunee people that she will always be there, that they, the 3 sisters, will always take care of them. So who is a oldest sister in this room or an oldest sibling? So welcome to the Corn Club. Who's a middle child?
Squash.
Yes. And the baby? The beans. Why do you think those are, what are the characteristics of those things that go with that?
Well, the corn is tall,
Mm-hmm.
so it must be the older sister.
How many of you as oldest siblings? Go ahead.
So the beans grow up tall.
Mm-hmm. Climbers, right? There's nothing like a climbing bean. Like nothing. But there's nothing like a baby who needs a little bit of support, but she also does wander a little bit. I might be the youngest. I'm not saying for sure. But here's the interesting thing. As I became an adult, something happened in my life, and I never thought about it. But I can tell you this now with a certainty. My mom, as an adult, we took into our family someone who was unexpected. As far as I was concerned, I'm like, we don't need more children. I'm enough. But during COVID, a very dear friend of ours moved into our home and became part of our family. And she's 10 years younger than me. And all of a sudden, I was a middle child. It was terrifying, I won't lie, for everybody. Turns out, what is it? Does anyone know what the middle child claim to fame might be? There's a lot of them in people, but in squash in particular.
It shaded the roots.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you translate that into human characteristics.
That's a great question. So, how many of you have ever touched the underside of a squash leaf or the stem of a pumpkin or a squash plant? What happens?
Prickles.
Yeah. So what they do is, yes, they protect. They do a bunch of different things, actually. Now, how many of you have seen a good squash leaf? A good one. Like, substantial. You have this great huge leaf. The underside of it is atrociously sticky, right? It's actually sticky, but also sharp. Nobody wants to hang out with that girl. Like, she's just, don't get too close. Don't touch her sisters, because you will, first of all, your hand will never be the same. For days you can wash it and it just doesn't feel quite right. But the other thing that happens is at the very end of a squash plant leaf, what does it look like? You ever noticed? Right, just at the very tips, they do this. When it rains, it runs down her arm into the center where she's from, which is where? Where everybody else lives, right? So in the science of this Indigenous system, or the companion planting of the whole world, those three plants work together in a synergistic way to protect and support each other. So all of our agriculture is under that premise. The thing about the tools that you would find out specifically in our region is that they're less needed than we think. This isn't a tractor and cleaning system when you have a really crusty middle sister who doesn't need for other things, because one of the things about that protection that she grants is the shade means that very few weeds will grow because there's no room. She's taking it, she's spiky, I say very welcoming. Like as a new middle sister, I'm here for that. I'm like, no, we're great. We're protective, that's all. Ish. But other things won't grow under there. Critters won't come in and they can't steal your beans or eat your plant because they can't get past her. And her reach is wide, right? How many of you know, you all know, you plant the squash at the outside because she's a wanderer, right? That's her job. That's literally her job. So part of the skill and the tools of our agriculture is knowing when to let things do their job. On a grand scale. One day I'm going to find the book, and some part of me wants to read it and some part of me really doesn't. But there is a journal in the history books of when the government was sending the army to try and stop the Haudenosaunee in Upper New York State from existing. We'll set that one down over there. We'll just leave it over there. But they were unhappy with us being present where they wanted to be. And so what they did was they burned the storehouse of corn. How do you store corn? In a crib, right? You have a storage. Okay. How heavy is a bushel? Do you know what the actual number?
56 pounds.
Thank you. I know you know. Some of us know because that's the number. Now the average is, they say that the average bushel is about 50 pounds, but it's about 56. When they burned our storehouse of corn in New York State to control or decide what we would or wouldn't eat, what they did was burn millions of bushels of corn. 56 pounds times a million. Just one. We had enough food. So now let me finish the story of the three sisters, because otherwise it's going to be a real deep conversation and we're not here for the whole shebang. We're still here for I want to tell you about my mom's antlers, and I should have brought some of them with me because I'm always trying to give them away. When those sisters got there and they promised to feed the people for all time, it's one thing to be like, yes, here, absolutely. Corn, sweet corn. Let's just say scarlet runner beans. They climb. They're beautiful also, like absolutely beautiful. And butternut squash. We'll say butternut. It's everybody's favorite right now. I'm not sure why it's getting the glow up it doesn't deserve, but sure. By themselves or listing them in that way is one thing. Do you feel like, I could probably eat those every day for the rest of my life and be good to go? First of all, boredom would get the best of me bar none. The second thing to really understand about the corn that was grown here is our corn is actually not sweet. It's not bioavailable, fresh off the cob. It's hard. Like the table. Here's the part that I think a lot of times we don't address enough. How many of you have an understanding or a belief that we need to eat less processed food in a general sort of way, right? I'm super torn right now, guys. Tuscarora white corn, Seneca white corn, Haudenosaunee. Any of the corns that we eat, we cannot eat or get any nutrients from if we don't process it. None. Lying, I'm not lying to you guys, not that kind of lying. Lying corn is the way in which you process our traditional corn because it's very hard on the outside. It's hard to describe to people. I actually had someone ask me one time if I'd ever had the soggy popcorn soup. Which is a fantastic description of what lied corn looks like when it's actually cooked. The other thing is, have any of you ever seen or heard of hominy? Usually comes in a can here, right? And it's ordinarily a Mexican white corn that's been boiled in limestone, right? What we did was boiled our white corn in hardwood ashes. When you do that, calcium, it becomes bioavailable. It's soft. It really does look like soggy popcorn. I don't know. My mom says I'm not supposed to tell people that. We're not supposed to talk about it that way, but that's what it looks like. And then when someone asked me if I'd ever had the popcorn soup, you can't change my mind now. That's just it. But here's the really interesting part about it. Those three foods are actually what in our tradition and in our creation story even are called our life sustainers. Here's the reason why. Between our corn, beans, and squash, they have the right amino acids, proteins, all of the things that you need to survive if you have nothing else. You can eat those three things and actually make it. You don't have to add other things. It does not sound fun to me. I mean, there's a million and one ways you can do it, but that's not like the most exciting part. So those three things together are enough, right? Now, here's the part where it gets tricky, because we're talking about agriculture, and for a long time, I ran a food security program with my mom talking about teaching people how to grow food in ways that were logical to us. Understanding that the Three Sisters tells a good story, it tells a cultural story, it teaches us a lot of lessons, but it can teach us a lot of lessons about a lot of things. It can teach us about working together as one of those sisters, as one of those people. I used it as actually part of the dissertation that I wrote for my doctorate, and I wanted people to understand that that structure that corn is also the structure of an organization in your community that provides a pillar of support and a place for people to gather. I wanted people to understand that community members who came out because they were interested in a conversation or cared about things and wanted to be part of it were like beings who showed up, and they might not know everything about it, but they're interested and they want to be there and they want to support it. And then you have these, and always with the middle kids, they usually get a bit of a bad rap, but those are our organizations, the funders, the providers of support. They offer things in a way that are usually really, to me, very much more standoffish, rigid. I ran a program, and so our squash were always our funders who had rules about how they could spend funds, but we were how they were spending funds, and what we did with it, they couldn't stop. So we made our own mound of support. We made our own sustenance with that same support so that we could provide millions of bushels of knowledge, of support, of culture, of language, of community. Because for me, the conversation of how we start to seed things to look forward, to understand them, is as a whole person. So that brings us back to, and I'm going to keep going back to the bones, in part because this is a little bit of an archaeology conversation, this much. I took an archaeology class when I was in my very first year of university, and I was excited because super cool bones, pots, pottery, like those things were just really interesting to me. And the instructor rolled out this like box, and it was really cool. And she's like, "This is going to be amazing. You're going to learn so much." And it was like a body. And there was like gems in the teeth and a hole in the head. And she was talking about the science of what they understood about how this community had been very forward thinking, because they knew that when swelling happened, they had to like drill a hole in the head of the person who was sick. And she told us like what disease they had and all. And I was like, I'll be in this room over here waiting for you to put somebody's grandma away. And I was in anthropology, which is the study of people, and I wanted to know more and I wanted to understand it. But you have to know that there was a time in the world, and there are still places and spaces and things where telling people you were Indigenous or wanting to talk about things that were Indigenous knowledge were not interesting, wanted, sought. Most often it was a point of like, oh, by the way, I might be Indigenous, but I can't be sure. No, I'm pretty sure, like the jig is up. Everybody knows the lady who teaches, and now it's become that point where people are like, well, what would you have done? Like Indigenous knowledge. And I'm like, I really wasn't there. But here's what I still know. So it's funny to me because we talk about what the tools would be. One of the really interesting things is, I know where we are, so it's a bit of a cheater question. I'm going to assume that you guys all know how agriculture works. There's vineyards everywhere, there's greenhouses, there's land, open arable land, right? In our culture, the thing that you're going to get most often from us when you ask a question of how agriculture worked is not the story of the specific tools. Very rarely. There's evidence of them, there's archaeological evidence of them. You're going to get the story of the thing. So, like I said, for example, we have a basket that's about half the size of this table. It's about this deep, and it's full of deer bones that my mom uses with kids to teach classes about how to plant food, how to grow things. The reason why today's conversation is so varied is because if we were to talk about archaeological evidence of our food system and our tools, I mean, I could have brought them. Here you go. Super cool. We did some stuff. We grew the stuff the same way all the time in the fields in this region, in the dish that everybody calls the green belt. That not one nation, but every nation in the region came to gather food, to procure. And I say gather, and people think like in my mind, I worry when I say that we're going to gather. We all gathered tonight, and nobody thinks it was an accident. But when you say someone is a hunter-gatherer, people are like, oh, they wandered willy-nilly in the bushes finding enough to not starve to death. No, actually, that's not what our system was. Oh, I'm almost back in the zone, sorry. Almost dipped into the no camera zone. To say that we gathered things, or we all gathered tonight to have a conversation. You didn't know you were going to have to participate. You thought you were going to just come and listen. My students always think the same thing, and they get there and they're like, we don't know what's happening. We're supposed to talk. We're not supposed to talk. Are we going to get in trouble if we talk? Are we going to get in trouble if we don't talk? What is happening? I'm like, yes. The answer is yes. When we think about what we know of the earth that we are part of, and I mean part of, because archaeology, obviously it did a fair bit of a number on me. Because here's the thing. I refuse to think that Indigenous knowledge isn't present everywhere. You just don't know that's what it is. You have taken it and made it your own, and there's nothing wrong with that. The difficulty is, I also know that science and knowledge have been existing in other places around the world. The difference is, I just want all of it. I don't care who made it up. I'm here for it. Because right now, in the world that we live in today, there is too much going on that we don't have any idea how to deal with. So if I can tell people, listen, I use bones for tools in my garden. I feel like more people should have a garden. I used to tell people that I was going to solve world hunger and tell nobody. I still kind of think that I might. But here's the reason why I believe that is actually doable. Two things. One, there is enough food on Earth produced for what? To feed everyone 2 times. 2 times, 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, 2 dinners. There's enough food produced on Earth for that, for every single person. Here's the part of that I struggle with. What if the thing that we're producing isn't what we need? Personally. I'm not from British Columbia, but I grew up out west, and there is something innately in me that feels at home with their food. I was in Sweden last year and the year before, and turns out that's where my grandma's family was from. And I ate reindeer for the first time. And I don't know how to describe a religious moment to eat something, but I felt complete eating reindeer. I also felt complete drinking coffee with them because they do it like nobody's business. And I talk about it with my students now because they have a practice called fika, which I now promote to everyone on earth ever. You ever heard of it? It's the best ever. I assigned it as homework last week. I might assign it as homework tonight just for fun because, you know, it could be a good time. You guys should try it. Fika is something that happens twice a day in Sweden. Seems like, okay, lots of things happen twice a day, 12 o'clock. At 10 and 3, they stop for about a half an hour, and they have coffee and a treat. It's usually like a cinnamon bun or something like that. And they sit with a friend. They don't do it alone. They don't do it at their desk. They don't do it at no. They meet in a coffee shop or they meet in somebody's space and they have coffee and a treat for like a half an hour and they talk to each other. And that's it. That's the whole thing. I assigned it as homework to my students last night and I had one student who lost her biscuit. Like just absolutely lost her biscuit. She's like, I don't understand. The coffee and the treat part, the conversation part. She's like the on purpose part. So when I prepared for today, the struggle for me is always, I have 18 stories I could tell you, 10 that I definitely want to share, and like 4 that are gonna have time. And I bring them all. Because sometimes in the room there is a something or a someone or a feeling or a thought or a moment where I'm like, this is their story. This is the one that gets to come. And that's what happens. And so after class last night, I had to sit down with said student and be like, should we talk now about the homework? Obviously, yes, because I am going to cheat the system somehow and do it wrong. Because you don't drink coffee and eat treats? I know you. You talk all the time. You talk more than I do, and that's saying, I get paid to do this. She's like, but that's the thing. I do it all the time. I said, I assigned this homework, and I'm giving you all the same homework for this reason. She does it on purpose. She sees a friend and she looks at them and she's like, can we talk a minute? And I'm like, my niece says the same thing, but she has like a very limited conversation capacity, so it's very different. But she will say, can we talk a minute? And she sits down, she's like, I never know what we're gonna talk about. There's no plan or agenda. I just wanna know what's happening in your life or tell you about what I'm going through because my mind is always busy. I said, but when I assigned the homework, the reason I assigned it was because I knew of everyone in that room, you were the only one already doing it. And you're great at it. You take the time to make a relationship in that moment with that person and give them your full attention. To give that moment its due. I said, I just prefer to do it with coffee and a treat because I love cinnamon buns and coffee. Those are like life force things for me, so why wouldn't I? In Sweden, it's a relationship thing to the place and the space and the people. When we think about what we're doing here tonight, what we're doing is talking about our tools, our story, and our belief and understanding of agriculture are not possible to be talked about without all of the other things that you talked about in the land acknowledgement. If you know very intimately the land that you are on, you now have the same responsibility I do to make sure that that dish, that land, that beaver tail, that place is still here 500 years from now. People talk about 7 generations. I look farther than that. We need to. Right now in the world, we need to more than ever. Because we could talk about in the 16 and 1700s, we had fields of corn. We didn't. The government burned it. So the tools we had were actually commodities that the government gave us. So we have to go back before then to think about the relationship that we had to each other, to the land, to the people. And I say the people, the plants, the animals, the things that we used every bit of to make sure that we were not wasting, that we were not leaving things behind. There was no garbage. Although one of my mom's mentors, one of my very good friends who passed away a few years ago, and apparently my whole life I've like collected up older folks. So she died when she was 84. But her argument was this lovely story of the 3 sisters and this small kitchen garden that we talk about. She's like, I mean, I guess, but would you really plant a garden outside your back door? Why would we do that when we had fields for miles elsewhere? She's like, I would throw my kitchen scraps out my back door. I'm like, are you telling me that this whole like shenanigan is a compost pile? Anthropologists would call this the midden. Is that correct? Is that what you're telling me? She's like, I'm not saying, I'm just saying it's possible. How do you argue with an old bird that's like, this is what it is? Well, there goes my whole master's thesis. It's fine. It's cool. I didn't really need it anyway. So I waited till she passed and then used it as my dissertation instead. What she taught me was that in every moment, in every conversation, two things. One, you can't take yourself that seriously. I've never, so it works out good for me. But the other thing that she taught me was very often in life we get stuck on the big things. And they're important, they are. But I asked her once because I had helped her fill out some paperwork. She was invited to go speak at a conference. And how many of you have heard of slow food movement? It's the antithesis of fast food, right? So everything slow, everything whole food, everything. Not that it's not processed necessarily, because again, she recognized that we processed our food. We also genetically modified our food. Shh, don't tell. I can explain that if you guys need me to, but what she said, so I said to her, like, tell me what you're gonna talk about. You're flying to Italy to talk about our food system, like the way that you have grown food. And she passed when she was 84. She retired officially when she was around 76. The year she turned 75, she did a thing which I thought was adorable and I wasn't sure I would ever do. She went out on her property and she collected up grapes because they grew there. And she made little tiny jars of grape jelly to give out to people for her birthday. I'm like, shouldn't this go the other direction? She said, yeah, but I've spent my whole life feeding my family and giving back to my community. I just want to say thank you because I'm still here. I'm like, okay, well now I feel like a jerk. Okay, it's good. But she was thoughtful, and it was important to her that people recognized, not because it was her birthday and she was looking for something, but because for her that was one more day that she got to give back to that world. Because according to her, we needed that. We needed not just the relationship, but also we needed that reminder that we all have something that we can offer to someone else in the world. So I asked her again, well, what are you giving to, like, what's the talk that you're gonna, I'm talking in Italy, she says. I'm like, I filled out all the paperwork and helped you buy the plane ticket. I am well aware where you're going. I'm gonna talk about the most important part of gardening. I could hardly wait to hear what she had to say. I was intrigued. I'm like, what was it? What are we gonna talk about? She's like, bugs, obviously, worms, hello? What was I thinking? Obvious, yeah, of course. I definitely want to go to a food conference and talk about worms. She's like, well, yeah, because if your soil isn't good, you don't have any worms, you don't have any bugs. If you don't have bugs, you don't have flowers. If you don't have flowers, you don't have pollinators. If you don't have pollinators, you don't have food. If you don't have food, nobody has anything. So of course we need bugs. Why does it always got to be so smart and logical and simple? Why does the thing that we need to do, why do we have to look back to learn a lesson we really don't need to look anywhere for if we think about what we already know? How are we going to think about the land acknowledgement that we started with and talk about having a relationship to the land and each other? We already know that. We've done it our whole lives. But sometimes we forget because the land that we're on doesn't look the same as it did before. It doesn't look like it needs something more. Really, it does. It needs so much more than we're giving it. But so do we. I'm going to stop because 9 whole minutes, in case you have a question. Usually I don't do that. This is fun. This is my favorite part. I'll wait until it gets awkward, so.
Is there other like planting combinations that are used similarly to like the Three Sisters and stuff, the like common ones? Are those plenty, but ones that are like.
So here's the thing about the Three Sisters. The thing you have to know as well is that those 3 things are not, corn's not the only one ever. Sunflowers is another one that is talked about often. The other thing that people have talked about is, of course, different kinds of squash, pumpkins, different runners. The kind of beans also vary because one kind of bean, I mean, scarlet runner beans are lovely. I do adore them, but forever. Very rarely would it ever be kidney beans. So just for the record, they're not our friends, actually. They're not great for us to digest. Us in particular, especially. Those 3 sisters in particular are from our creation story. They're the reason why those are our sustainers. But in the world of gardening, companion planting is like amok with them. But here, that's one of the conversations is pumpkins versus squash is a conversation, which I'm sorry, they're still the same. Like it's like having a sister you don't talk about, right? Like I have a brother that is not mine. I'm an only child. Pumpkin and squash, that's the thing. Like I said, the sunflowers is one. Sunchokes is also really popular here. But the trick about sunchokes, Jerusalem artichokes. We would have planted that one time if we actually planted it and walked away. And that's it. Because they're beautiful, the flower comes out, it's lovely, it's about as tall as I am. It probably at some point was as tall as my brother, but I'm cooler. What you're waiting for with sunchokes, and that's the part that people don't always know, is what you're waiting for with the sunchokes is, yes, they would provide a space for the beans to grow up, but late in the fall, once the land has changed and the air starts to get cooler, that's when the root gets big. Because, yes, it's not right away. Like if you dig it up in the early part of the season when the sunflower is up, well, you've wasted everybody's time. Because then it's like not taking the early beans. It technically could have done its job because the thing about sunchokes is they are, I always call them promiscuous. That's not really what it is. They're just they are extremely good at reproducing and extremely difficult at getting rid of. So with the sunchokes, because they are something that we would grow like potatoes, right? Except that we didn't have diabetes in our communities because they're also they're in inulin, right? So they're physiologically, your blood sugar isn't spiked from eating them, but you can cook them the same way. That's one of the other things anyway.
Any implication in terms of hunting, adding meat to the sense of agriculture?
Yes, because I'm an omnivore, absolutely. But here's the thing, and it's not lost on me where we are. Just Short Hills is right there. One of the things about caring for the land is making sure that the balance of nature is kept. Similarly, in our bodies, we would have, like I said, duck fat and fried eggs and duck fat, anything in duck fat. Yeah. So good. It is. It's just like, it's something I'm quite fond of. But adding meat to that mix, we have to be logical. If we lived in a longhouse, and here's the example. So a longhouse, Crawford Lake up, they have the recreations of the longhouse that there's archaeological evidence of, that they were like, okay, we know that this is the size of them. What they want you to understand, how we want to think about it is, for every single fire you have approximately a large family. That could be as many as 10 people per fire pit. So every 20 feet, you have 10 people. If you have 200 people living in a single building, how much meat do you think everybody gets? This isn't like it's steak night, everybody. We've killed a herd of animals. That's not how it works, right? But we were purposeful in our use of animals in that there was not waste. Nothing. Everything gets used in its way. So yes, the fat, the whole animal. Part of that is also our health is different, right? It's one of the reasons why we talk about the commodity, because it interrupted that system. Similarly for me, when I was little, I was a vegetarian for a couple of years. What I discovered is it's actually just the particular kinds of meat that are hard on my body, not all of them. If I eat reindeer, I feel like $1 billion. If I eat venison, same thing. But it's in moderation. The Three Sisters can sustain us in a time when hunting is bad, when the animals are sparse. You could eat Three Sisters soup by itself, because there are herbs, there are berries, there's sunchokes. There are things that will make everything hearty without needing to have meat all the time. Because the thing that, and the reason why I started with that Three Sisters story is because you can actually get sufficient protein to survive a whole winter if you had to, with those three things without any meat. We don't want to, because everybody does love some venison. And wild turkeys, which are out right now, right? Like there were a dozen of them behind my friend's house the other day, and I'm like, come here. I want to have turkey. Come here. Nobody listens to me, but that's fine. But you have to understand that that's the connection, right? So if you go, for example, right now, if you go to Six Nations, 9 times out of 10, people are going to talk about corn soup. Everybody talks about corn soup. It's the thing, right? No thanks, I'm good. When I was a kid, the very first time I ever had corn soup, because I didn't move to Canada until I was 10. My mom had traveled before I was born. The very first time that I had it, there's two things. We talked early on about how corn is lied, right? You have to boil it in hardwood ashes. So the very first time I had corn soup, the cook was lazy. And I say that with all respect. I don't know who it was. I don't know. It tasted like hardwood ashes. If you don't rinse your corn, you're never going to get a man. Like, that's the nature of the old stories, but you would add things to it. Now, we use salt pork now. That's the meat that everybody knows in corn soup. My mom makes hers with smoked turkey. That's the meat that I know in corn soup.
I had some on Saturday. It was ham. It was edited.
Yes. Well, and was it actually ham or was it cubed pork? Because like pork belly.
The lady that was making it told me it was ham. So. I don't know if she cheated or not.
No, ham is cheating. That's just for the record. That's the whole point. There are purists who would say it's salt pork only, and they will cook it just as is. How many of you have boiled bacon? What happens to the fat? It renders until it's mushy. Salt pork is the same. You lost me. I'm not here for that. In total fairness, and camera or not camera, I'm a soup snob. My mom is good at making soup. I have had lots of people who are exceptionally good cooks in my life. I'm fussy. So ham is a no, salt pork is only under duress. The Three Sisters soup as well, I have friends who make it. I have friends who are caterers. Three Sisters soup is literally those three sisters. And when I said, do you ever have people who like just throw three things in a pot? My mom makes Three Sisters soup, there's 3 things in it. That's it. You can actually make it just as is. Because how have you ever had broth that is, you can do vegetable broth with the skins of all the stuff. But if you boil water with squash in it, leave some aside, not cooked, and boil it, it makes its own broth. The squash disappears, right? It gets creamy as well. It adds that depth to it. That's what we're looking for. But there were lots of other things that we grew, that we harvested from nature that have different flavor profiles as well. Spice bush is coming back. It's something that has a lot of different flavor profiles that you would find similar to, and I don't know what else to call them, and I will apologize now, Indian cookies and Indian donuts. I love them. And people are like, these aren't our traditional foods. And I'm like, I don't care. Was there something that you were like, oh, I didn't know I wanted to know this, but we didn't talk about it? Or was it just so many random things that you didn't know?
Okay, I want to know how to stop the animals from eating my stuff. So I didn't realize that squash might deter them.
Squash might deter them. The other thing, and this is going to sound strange. Again, I don't listen to my mom, so it's not from her. But one of the things, have you ever seen a person who has a garden and it's like this great big garden and there's a fence at the back of it? But there's a fence to nowhere, right? And there's still garden behind it, but there's a fence? They'll eat everything inside of their fence. Put a fence at the back of your garden, give them their own. Tell them the deal. That's yours. Stay over there. Give them the things that are probably the most useful. It's shocking to me the number of people who are like, well, they're eating my stuff. I'm like, I feel like they've cared for it more than you have. They feel pretty entitled. And don't get me wrong, like I love a good entitled feeling. It's great. Because they're so smug and adorable when they do it. I still have the go round with the rabbits at my house for the same reason. Because when I first bought my house 25 years ago, I planted all kinds of things and I watched them chew it down in front of me and not eat it. And then the rabbit went and walked into the bush. I was like, well, that's offensive. And rather than fencing my garden, I fenced theirs. So how my mom does it is twofold. If you have a really tiny space and you can't afford it, then fence it. Yeah, obviously that, like, there are lots of people who do. But what she does is she puts a fence at the back of her garden and behind it plants another small, it doesn't need to be a lot of things. That's where they're going to go first because that's the safest place. They're already protected from you because they've got a fence. They're like, oh, thank God they finally figured out because we really don't like to have to like get close to them, go into the yard. But right here, we're good to go because it's fenced. We're safe. And it's literally just, it's a piece of fence that's like this high. It's not very big, but it's just a row of fence at the back. And then she plants another whole miniature garden. It's a few things. And right in front of that, squash. Because after they cross that fence, they're like, oh, this is garbage. I don't want to go in here. It's lazy, only plants trash. Also, my back is itchy now. Because that's what happens when I touch pumpkin leaves. I get itchy. So yeah, there are ways around that, right? I don't know how the deals work. My mom makes deals. It's really weird. But that's the deal that she made, is that this is yours, please use it. I want you to have it. She does it with deer. She does it with like rabbits still at my house. We have rabbits that sit at the back of our garden, but don't come into it. They have shamelessly, like they are shameless. They're like, what are you doing in my yard? They've come so far now, they sit by the cars. They come to the front yard. But beside our house, we have succulents, we have calendula, we have kale, we have all kinds of things in a tiny bed beside the house. I've never seen them in it. But at the back of our garden, there's a fence. And behind it is a whole bunch of other stuff. When she did it the first time, I was like, whew. I love you, Mom, but what are you doing? But ever since she made the deal, we don't have issues with pests. And I say pests. The other thing that she does is purposefully thinks about, asks, looks up, Googles, whatever, things to grow with other things. Not Three Sisters style for production, but things like nobody questions when you put marigolds with tomatoes or basil with tomatoes because it just makes them better. But what it also does is make them unattractive to bugs and pests and animals. Because marigolds stink. I don't know if you know this or not. Blech. Not just to me, but also to the animals. So look up what those other things are and edge your garden with them. So the fence you have might end up actually being beautiful, but it's plants. Other plants that they don't care for. And if you're real desperate, hot peppers. Hot pepper powder. It doesn't hurt them the way it hurts. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, I can't breathe. It's too, like, it's not like that. It's unappealing and it's a bad taste in their mouth. That one was much more fun than I thought. Anybody else? Now I have one last question for you guys. And then I guess I'll let you go, even though my tendency, I did assign homework, so I feel good about that. That's okay. When we started this evening, and I listened from the side, we talked about being in a place that has been here since time immemorial, before we were here. Like, I recognize the fact that as a human being, we also have a lifespan. I would really ask you to think about, because this is only the first in a series for this. I don't know who's next, but I'm super excited for them. You guys have been attentive and interested, and when you are a teacher, one of the things that very rarely do my students think about, I can see all of your faces. And only mine is what you guys are seeing. They forget that. So I see the eye rolls, I see the lack of attention, I see the intent, I see the entertainment, I see the joy and the excitement and the aha moments and all of the cool things. I want you to go home and have those moments about where you live. So when you go home, when you are, not now because it's dark, when you have the chance to sit for a moment in the space that is your space, this isn't about whose it was a year ago, a decade ago, 1,000 years ago. Right now, you have the chance to look after that space. What is the relationship you have to it? What do you do with it? How do you spend your time with it? Do you know it well? I have 15 acres of property and I only know the first 5 acres well. And I acknowledge that because I have a responsibility to the other 10, and I know that I have things to do. I have trees that are down that need to be taken out. I have plants that are starting to come up that shouldn't be in that place because the landscape is changing. The backyard at my house, I know that I actually have cattails coming up in a place that normally we don't have enough water for. And they're back now for the first time in almost 20 years. And then I think to myself, I've lived here long enough to know that that was 20 years ago. That's messed up. And I'm excited because what an amazing opportunity to have such a beautiful responsibility. To know that the land is changing and I have to also then change too so that we can work together. Because my garden this year moved forward in my yard. It got smaller. We now plant we did raised gardens for the first time in my whole life. And I was excited and it was cute and adorable. And I also felt really sad because we had to make soil instead of using what was already there. So something is changing. The land itself is changing, and I know that. And I want you guys to think about that tomorrow when you are maybe having coffee and a treat with someone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me.